It was 2:17 in the morning when my phone rang. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I am a journalist. I have spent 20 years chasing stories that other people were too afraid, too lazy, or too sane to chase. I have interviewed cartel enforcers and ciudad juarez. I have sat across from men who confess to things I still cannot repeat. I do not scare easily. I tell you this not to impress you, but so that you understand what it means when I say that. The phone call at 2:17 in the morning was the first time in my career that my hands actually shook while I answered. The number was blocked. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish, more than anything else I have ever wished in my life, that I had let it go to voicemail. I picked up. There was silence on the other end for 3 full seconds. I counted. Because that is what you do when your instincts are screaming in. You and your mouth is too curious to listen. Then a voice, calm, almost bored, said, "Would you like to interview a demon?" I laughed. Of course I laughed. What else do you do at 2 in the morning when a stranger asks you a question like that? I asked who this was. The voice did not answer. Instead, it gave me an address. The Vatican. 11:30 that night. I told the voice it had the wrong number. That I didn't do supernatural stories. That I was a serious journalist and not some late-night radio host looking for ghost stories. And then the voice said my name. My full name. My home address. And then it said something that no stranger, no blocked number, no prank caller should have ever been able to say. It said the name of someone I had lost. Someone who had been dead for 6 years. Someone whose name I had not spoken aloud to anyone. In all that time, I did not laugh again after that. I want to be honest with you about what happened next. Because honesty is the only thing I have left to offer you now. I told myself I was going to the Vatican that night as a journalist. Chasing a story, doing my job. That is a lie I told myself from the car. On the plane, in the taxi through the wet Roman streets. The truth is simpler and uglier. I went because I was afraid not to. I went because whoever, or whatever, was on that call had already proven it knew things about me that no living person should know. And I was terrified of what would happen if I said no. So I went. The man who met me had a side door of the Vatican. Not the grand entrance the tourists photograph, but a narrow service door tucked into a shadowed corner of the walls. Was a priest. Old. Older than old. His face had the particular kind of exhaustion you only see in people who have spent decades carrying something they were never meant to carry alone. He did not introduce himself. He simply looked at me, up and down, the way you might examine a package to make sure it hasn't been damaged in shipping, and said, "You're the one they called." I said yes. He turned without another word, then led me inside. I have been inside grand buildings before. I have interviewed heads of state and palaces, executives in glass towers that scrape the sky. Nothing prepared me for what it felt like to walk behind that old priest. Down a staircase that seemed to exist in no official floor plan of the Vatican. Into a hallway that grew colder with every step. As though we were descending not just beneath a building, but beneath something older than the building itself. The priest did not speak as we walked. I tried, twice, to ask him questions. Who was I meeting? Why had they chosen me? What was actually happening? And both times he simply held up a hand, not unkindly, but with the absolute certainty of a man who has silenced far more insistent questions than mine. It was only when we reached the door, a heavy iron thing, scarred with what I can only describe as centuries of carved crosses, prayers etched directly into the metal, layer upon layer upon layer, as if someone had been trying again and again to make absolutely sure something on the other side could never doubt what it was facing. Eddie finally spoke. He put his hand flat against the iron, not touching the door so much as bracing himself against it. And he said, "He lies." I asked him what that meant. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that I would spend the rest of that night, and every night since, trying to forget. It was not fear exactly. It was closer to grief. The look of a man standing at the edge of a grave he has visited too many times. Everything he tells you, the priest said, will be true. That is what makes him dangerous. He does not need to lie to destroy you. He only needs to choose which truths to give you, and in what order. Then he opened the door. I do not know what I expected to see. I think, somewhere in the part of my brain that still clung to the comfortable disbelief of a modern, secular man, I expected nothing at all. An empty cell. A trick. An elaborate hoax designed to humiliate a journalist gullible enough to fly, to roam over a phone call. Some small, arrogant part of me was almost hoping for that. A hoax I could survive. A hoax made a good story. What I found instead was a man. Not a monster. Not horns, not fire. Not the theater prop imagery that a lifetime of films had prepared me for. Just a man, seated on a plain wooden chair in the center of a bare stone room. Dressed in simple gray clothing, his hands folded in his lap. He looked, if anything, unremarkable. The kind of man you would not glance at twice on a crowded train. That, I would come to understand, was the first and worst mistake I made that night. Believing that because something looked ordinary, it could not also be the single most dangerous thing I would ever encounter. He smiled when I entered. Not a cruel smile. A patient one. The smile of someone who has been waiting a very long time for a very specific arrival, and is pleased, finally, that the waiting is over. There was a clock on the wall behind him. The old-fashioned kind with a visible minute hand. It read 2:17. The same time my phone had rung the night before. Though I had no way of knowing that yet, not consciously. I noticed it only because, as he spoke his first words to me, the minute hand ticked backward instead of forward. 2:16. "You're late," he said. "I won't hold it against you." I asked him, because it was the only question I had prepared. The only question that felt small enough to survive saying out loud. "Are you really a demon?" He tilted his head, considering the question the way you might consider a wine list. "That's the word your kind uses," he said. "I've never much cared for it. But I won't correct you. Not yet." I glanced at the clock again without meaning to. 2:15. I would come to understand the rule of it later. Once it was too late to matter every time he told me something true. The clock lost another minute. I did not know that yet. I only knew that time, in that room, was moving the wrong way. I asked him why he was here. Locked in a cell beneath the most sacred building in Christendom. And this is the part of the story that I still cannot fully explain. Even now, even to myself, in the quiet hours when I cannot sleep. He told me that he had not been captured. He had asked to be locked away. I laughed, the same nervous, disbelieving laugh from the phone call. A demon, asking humans to imprison it. It sounded absurd. It still sounds absurd typing it now. But he did not laugh with me. He simply watched me laugh, with the patient, faintly sad expression of a man watching a child mock something they do not yet understand. I asked him the obvious question. Why would a demon fear God? 188,09,491,009,52,970 isn't it the creatures like him exist in opposition, in defiance? I'm afraid because they have already chosen their side and burned every bridge back. He was quiet for a long moment before he answered. And when he did, his voice had changed. Gone was the light, almost amused tone from before. What replaced it was something heavier. You think hell is where the condemned go, he said. He smiled, and it was not a comforting smile. You have no idea where heaven sends them. I asked him what that meant. He did not elaborate, not yet. He only said that fear, for something like him, was not about fire or falling. It was about what came after the falling stopped. I looked at the clock again, 2:11. I had not seen it move, but it had moved. Not Eden, he told me. Something older than Eden. Something that existed before the story you were taught, before the serpent, before the apple, before any of the scripture you grew up half believing in Sunday pews. He described a garden of beings who did not know death, because death had not yet been invented as a concept. Beings who did not know fear, because fear requires the possibility of loss, and nothing in that place could be lost. And then, he said, one of them asked the question. What happens, the question went, if we say no to him? I asked what he meant by him. He looked at me as though the question itself were slightly absurd. The way you might look at someone who asked you to define the sun. You already know who I mean, he said. You simply never had to consider they might have made something before your ancestors. Something that got to ask the question first. He told me that those who ask, who dared to wonder aloud what refusal might feel like, were not destroyed. That would have been mercy, he said. And mercy was not what followed. Instead, they were separated, cut away from a presence they had never known they depended on, until the moment it was gone. And it was in that absence, he said, that something in them broke that had never been capable of breaking before. That is what your scripture calls the fall, he told me. Not a fruit. Not a serpent. A question, asked too honestly, by beings who did not yet understand what the answer would cost them. I asked him, my voice barely holding steady, what he was in that story. He smiled again. And this time there was nothing patient in it at all. I was there, he said. I am a witness. That is the only word I will give you tonight. I asked him because I needed something solid to hold on to. Something closer to a fact than a myth. How did you come to be here? How does a being like you end up in a cell beneath the Vatican? In the 21st century, waiting, apparently, for me? He told me it began outside a small monastery in the Italian countryside. In a year he declined to give me. He did not tell me the name of the town. And when I pressed, he simply said that some doors, once open, should not be pointed to for others to find. He appeared there, he said. Not as smoke or flame, but exactly as he appeared to me now. An ordinary man, walking out of an olive grove at dusk, asking to speak with whoever was in charge. The monks, understandably, did not believe what he told them about himself. Not at first. What changed their minds, he said, were the predictions. He began telling the monastery small things. The date a particular sickness would pass through the village. The name of a cardinal who would rise unexpectedly in Rome. The outcome of events that, at the time, seemed entirely unpredictable. And one by one, exactly as he described. Every single one of them came true. Word reached Rome. Rome sent people. Then Rome sent more people, and eventually, he said, entire committees. Entire secret tribunals convened for the sole purpose of understanding what, exactly, had walked out of that olive grove and why it seemed to know the shape of the future the way other men know the shape of their own hands. They interrogated him for years, he told me. Decades. And at the end of all of it, after every test, every rite, every exorcism attempted and failed. Not because the exorcisms did not work, but because, as he put it, There was never anything in me for them to cast out. He made only a single request. He asked to stay. I asked him why. What could possibly be worth choosing imprisonment? Choosing walls and iron and silence. We clearly could have walked back out into the world. He was quiet again, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped to something almost gentle. And that gentleness frightened me more than anything sharp or monstrous could have. You asked me earlier what I fear, he said. I'll tell you the truth now, since you've come this far. He said he feared that God would ask him to come home. I did not understand. I told him so. Surely, I said, forgiveness, reconciliation, redemption. Whatever word belonged to a demon being welcomed back. Surely that was the thing every fallen creature secretly longed for. He looked at me the way you might look at someone who has just said something so naively wrong that correcting it feels almost cruel. You assume forgiveness is a gift, he said. You've never considered what it costs to receive something you no longer believe you deserve. From a source you spent an eternity convincing yourself you hated. Hell, at least, makes sense to me now. I built a self inside it. What I feared is a door opening. And a voice saying, come home, all is forgiven. And discovering that after everything, I am not able to walk through it. That the part of me capable of accepting forgiveness is the part I had burned away first. On purpose, so it could never be used against me. He looked down at his folded hands. That, he said, is a worse hell than any hell your priests have ever painted on their ceilings. I needed a moment before I could ask another question. He seemed to understand that, and he let the silence sit, unbothered. Patient. The way something ancient is patient with something that has only lived a handful of decades. Eventually I asked him something else. Something that had been sitting uneasily in my chest since I'd walked through that iron door. 322,017, 200, and 1,017, 25,620. I asked if I was the first person he had spoken to like this. He smiled. And something in that smile told me the answer before he gave it. No, he said. But I am not going to tell you which number you are. Numbers give you a sense of order. I'd rather you not have that comfort tonight. I asked him what happened to the others then. If he would not tell me how many there were. He told me about a journalist who had sat in that same chair years before me, and asked many of the same questions I had asked. That journalist, he said, had gone home afterward and, within the month, taken his own life. He said this plainly, without cruelty, the way you might report a simple fact of weather. Another, he said, had simply vanished. No body was ever found. No explanation was ever recorded. The Vatican, he told me, had quietly closed the file. The way institutions with long memories learn to close files they cannot afford to leave open. One more, he said, had been braver, or perhaps simply more foolish, than the others. That journalist had asked him directly, do you lie? Yes, he told her. About what, she had asked. And he told me. Looking directly into my eyes as he repeated the answer he had given her. Word for word. So that I would understand it was meant for me now as much as it had been meant for her then. About everything. I stood up. I want you to understand that I am not a coward. That in 20 years of chasing dangerous stories I have never once simply walked away from an interview. But I stood up that night. And I told him I was leaving, and I meant it. In the way you mean things in the half-second before your body overrides your intentions. He did not move to stop me. He did not need to. He simply said, without raising his voice at all, you haven't asked the real question yet. I told him I had asked plenty of questions. You've asked me about myself, he said. Every question so far has been about me. There's one question underneath all of them. And you still haven't asked it. I stood there, halfway between the chair and the iron door, and against every instinct screaming at me to keep walking. I asked him who was actually keeping him in prison here. Something in his face changed. For the first time all night he looked very briefly like he had not expected the words in that particular order. "There it is," he said quietly. He told me the truth then, or what he called the truth. And I have turned his words over so many times since that night that I could probably recite them to you now without a single misplaced syllable. The door, he said, had never been built to keep him in. I asked him what he meant. He said that a room can only ever hold two kinds of things: something dangerous enough that it must not get out, or something valuable enough that it must not be taken. He let me sit with that for a moment before he told me which one he was. "I am not the danger in this building," he said. "I am the guard. I have spent longer than your church has existed standing between that door and something on the other side of it. Something that has never, not once, been let out. The iron isn't holding me down here. It's holding me here on purpose. In front of it. Because I am the only thing left that remembers how to keep it asleep." I asked him what was behind him. He would not say. He told me only that the Vatican did not keep him locked in that cell because they feared him. They kept him there because of what he was standing guard over. "Not hell," he said quietly. "Not devils. Something older. Something that came before either of us had a name for what we were. That is the only reason the church has kept a door like this fed and guarded and quiet for so long. Not to protect the world from me. To let me keep protecting it from what's behind me." He let that sit in the cold stone air between us. "So ask yourself," he said, "whether you still believe I am the one who should frighten you." The lights went out. I want to be precise about this, because precision is the only thing keeping me sane as I write this down. It was not a flicker. It was not a brownout. The kind you might expect from old wiring in an ancient building. Every light in that stone room, every source of illumination, simply ceased. All at once. As though something had reached out and closed a hand around them. In the total darkness, I heard his voice. Close to my ear now, though I had not heard him move. "He can hear prayers," the voice said. "Even the ones you don't say out loud. Especially those." When the lights returned, and they did return. Though I could not tell you how much time had passed in that darkness. Whether it was seconds or much, much longer. The priest was gone from the room. I had not even realized he had been standing there this whole time. Silent in the corner behind me. But somehow his absence now felt like the loudest thing in the world. Behind the demon, the clock on the wall read 11:30. The exact time I had been told to arrive. As though every minute I had watched it lose. One truth at a time. Had simply been carried backward and handed to the start of the night. So that the whole conversation could begin again for someone else. I found the priest a moment later. Through the small barred window in the door. Standing in the corridor outside. He was weeping. An old man. A priest who had clearly seen and survived things that I could not begin to imagine. Standing alone in a stone hallway, weeping like a child. When he saw me looking at him, he pressed his face close to the bars. And in a whisper so urgent it barely qualified as sound at all. He said only 3 words. "Don't go up." I do not remember most of the walk back to the surface. I remember the priest's hand on my arm guiding me. More forcefully than before. Up staircases that seemed shorter on the way out than they had been on the way in. As though the building itself were eager to be rid of me. Just before we reached the door that would return me to the ordinary night air of Rome. the voice from the cell and possibly from somewhere behind us. Though we had left that room and that hallway far behind, reached me one final time. "Don't pray alone," it said. I did not understand what that meant. I still do not fully understand it. I have turned it over every night since, trying to decide whether it was a warning, a threat, or something closer to advice from a being who understood, better than any of us, what it meant to stand watch over something so that no one else had to. At the surface, the priest produced a small recording device from within his robes. The same device, I realized with a jolt, that had been sitting on a small table in the cell the entire time, recording everything, though I had never given permission and had entirely forgotten it was there. He told me, in a voice stripped of all the warmth a man his age should have carried, that I would forget. That this was, apparently, how it always went. Whatever I had seen and heard that night would fade from me the way a nightmare fades in the first minutes of daylight, leaving behind only a residue, a shape where memory used to be. He was right. When I woke the next morning in my hotel room, with no memory of how I had gotten there, I found that I could recall almost nothing of the demon's face. I could describe the room. I could describe the priest, the iron door, the sensation of cold stone beneath my shoes, but the face of the thing I had spoken to for what must have been hours, that was simply gone, as though it had never been given to me to keep in the first place. 3 days later, back home, unpacking a bag I barely remembered filling, I found the recorder. I do not know how it ended up among my things. I do not remember taking it. I do not remember the priest giving it to me. But there it was, small and great and ordinary, sitting at the bottom of my travel bag like it had always belonged there. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time before I pressed play. The recording was mostly what you would expect, my own voice, asking questions I barely remembered asking, and his voice answering, in that same calm, unhurried tone I could recall the sound of but not the face behind it. I listened for almost an hour, my hands growing colder with every passing minute, before I heard something that made me stop the recording entirely and sit in silence for a long time afterward. Beneath our conversation, faint underneath the words, like something recorded in a room adjacent to the one we sat in, there was another voice. A voice I did not remember hearing at any point that night. Layered quietly under everything else, saying only 4 words, over and over. Patient and unhurried, the way water is patient with stone. I have been here. That night, at 3:17 in the morning, the exact same time. I realized only afterward, on the exact same clock face as the phone call that had started all of this. I heard 3 knocks come from inside my bedroom wall. Not from the door. Not from the window. From inside the wall itself. As though something on the other side of the plaster were reaching through it. Testing the boundary. The way you might knock gently on a door you are not yet certain you are permitted to open. I want to end this the way it actually ended, without softening any part of it, because I think you deserve that. And because some part of me still believes that telling the truth about what happened is the only protection I have left. Weeks later, going back through that recording for what must have been the 100th time, searching every second of it for something, anything, that might make sense of what had happened to me, I found something I had missed. There is a voice on that recording. My voice, saying a sentence I do not remember ever speaking. The sentence appears 11 minutes and 40 seconds into the recording. According to my own memory, the only memory I have left of that night, fragmentary and unreliable as it is, I had not yet begun speaking at that point in the conversation at all. I was still standing near the door. I was still deciding whether to leave. And yet there, on the recording, clear as anything, is my own voice. Calm in a way I have never once been calm in my life. Saying, "All right, I'll let you in." I do not know who I was speaking to. I do not know what door I was opening, or where, or when. I have asked myself that question every single night since I found that recording, and I have never once found an answer that lets me sleep afterward. Every night since, at 3:17 in the morning, I hear the knocking. The first night, it was 3 knocks. The second night, 4. Last night, it was 5. And the 5th knock did not come from the wall. It came from inside my room. If this story kept you up at night, make sure to subscribe for more. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. This is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. The characters, events, dialogue, and supernatural elements in the story are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real people, places, organizations, religious institutions, or actual events is purely coincidental. This story does not claim that the events described actually happened,